Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us at the MTRS today for our February vacation special Ready for Retirement live online. We have a number of topics and a full agenda to get to today, so I'm just going to go through a couple of housekeeping issues. In a few moments, you'll be hearing from Jennifer Prococo and Jennifer Samelowicz from our Springfield office, and Jennifer's in our Charlestown office, and we'll be going over a number of topics to help you get ready for retirement. Jen, if you could just hit the next slide. A couple of housekeeping issues we want to go over. We will be answering questions live. We have a full team of people in the other room with laptops who are waiting to take your questions in the Q&A panel. The Q&A panel should be somewhere near the top right-hand corner of your screen. It looks like a little chat box with a question mark on it. We do please ask that you keep your questions somewhat general in nature. Specific questions related to your account or your circumstances, we obviously can't get into in a chat window. If you need additional help, you can always go to the contact page of our website and send us an email through there. Please try and limit questions to topics that have already been covered. We will ask certain questions during breaks in the presentation. We'll ask general questions out loud that have been asked in the chat, questions that we think that everyone would benefit from hearing the answer from. We'll be reading those out loud and answering them live. We can't guarantee that all your questions will be answered in real time. And again, if we don't get to everyone, because we are expecting a rather large audience today, we'll be happy to take your questions through our contact page on our website. A couple of other brief issues that are not mentioned here. I was informed that we may have some people who require closed captioning. If you do require closed captioning, there is a CC button. It looks like a little box on the playback bar. You can click that to enable live captioning on your screen. And I also just want to say, the last time we did this presentation, it was the last day of our former executive director's tenure, and she had worked here for 38 years, Erica Glaster. Now, here in February, we have a new executive director, and his name is Jonathan Osimo. He's been with the MTRS for a long time, I think 28 years, if I'm right. And I just want to say congratulations and welcome to our new executive director, Jonathan Osimo. It's great to have our new team on board, and we're looking forward to the future. And without further delay, I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer Prococo, who's going to take you through the overview and the contents.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jen Prococo, Senior Benefits Supervisor here at the Massachusetts Teachers Retirement System. And like Scott said, Jen and I will be doing this webinar today. So we just want to welcome you. Thank you for taking the time out of your February break. I hope you're having a nice week off from school. So we just want to say we really appreciate you taking the time, to come here today and prepare yourself for retirement. We want to make this program very valuable to you today. And we want to, just mention again, you can follow along with the PDF that was sent to you when you registered for the seminar today. So we do have a lot to talk about today here with retirement. We have great topic to discuss here, and we have a lot of ground to cover. So we just want to go over a quick overview before we get into the actual program. So I am going to be taking you through part one, which is some different pre-retirement issues and things that you need to consider before you retire. And then Jen and I will be taking you through part two. We're going to walk you step by step through part one of the retirement application. That's the part that you are responsible to fill out. We're just going to walk you through that process so you know what to expect and when throughout your retirement process. And then lastly, Jen will be taking you through other retirement issues and topics that you need to be aware of as you approach retirement. And like Scott mentioned, we do have some designated question and answer slides throughout this program today. So first, what is the MTRS? Well, the Massachusetts Teachers Retirement System is your retirement system, and we are formed under Mass General Law. We are formed under, we operate as a defined benefit plan, and we were formed under Mass General Law, Chapter 32, and we operate under Section 401A of the Internal Revenue Code. So your benefit when you retire is based on your age, your service, and salary. And the great thing about your benefit is that it's paid monthly for life and it's guaranteed for life. It's never going to decrease and may actually only increase with future cost of living adjustments. And Jen will get into that a little bit later on this morning. And lastly, fluctuations in the financial markets do not affect the amount of your benefit. The pension fund is invested in a well-diversified portfolio with a focus on long-term returns. So here at the Teachers Retirement System and actually all Massachusetts public retirement system, we had Pension Reform 3 back in April of 2012. And because of this now, our members' benefits are based partly by their membership date. And here at the Teachers Retirement System, we distinguish the two membership tiers depending on when you establish membership in a Massachusetts public retirement system. So if you've been a member of the MTRS or any Massachusetts public retirement system since before April 2nd, 2012, you would be considered a Tier 1 member. If you became a member on or after April 2nd, 2012, you would be considered a Tier 2 member. I do want to stop briefly here on this slide and let you know that later on when I get into some different retirement calculation examples, those examples are Tier 1 examples. They are not Tier 2. There are a couple of main differences between the two tiers. The first would be when we calculate your benefit as a Tier 1 member, we use an average of your highest 3 consecutive years. Our Tier 2 members, we use an average of your highest 5 consecutive years. Another main difference between the two is that our Tier 1 members can retire with at least 10 years of service and be age 55. They can also retire when they have at least 20 years of service at any age. And our Tier 2 members have to have at least 2 years of service, and they're not able to retire until they're at least age 60. And the biggest main difference between the two tiers, or the last main difference between the two tiers, would be the age factor. So in retirement, when you retire, your age is assigned to a factor, and the factors for our Tier 2 members are lower than our Tier 1 members. So in retirement, one of the things that the MTRS does is we look at the earnings that you're paid every year. So things like your salary, any stipends, longevity, things like that. And we need to decide and make sure that what the retirement deduction we got is eligible to qualify as regular compensation. And what that means is we can use it in the calculation of your final salary average. So everything on the left-hand side of this slide are items that are pensionable, meaning we do want to receive that retirement deduction, and we can use these items in the calculation of your final salary average. Everything on the right-hand side is excluded, meaning we don't want to receive a retirement deduction on these monies, and we cannot use them in the calculation of your final salary average. So I'm just going to go through them one by one, starting with the left-hand side, what's included. So your annual base salary per your collective bargaining agreement or individual contract. So if you're a teacher, this is typically in your collective bargaining agreement under a step and scale. If you have an individual contract, usually your salary is listed somewhere in that individual contract. Next one down here is regular longevity. This needs to be tied to your length of service in the district, and it would also need to be listed in your contract. The next one down here is athletic coaching, and this in particular is actually written directly into Chapter 32, so it doesn't necessarily have to be in your contract for it to be pensionable, but you do need to be directly instructing the sport. So football coach, baseball coach, basketball coach, as long as you are directly instructing the sport, that would be pensionable. And the last bullet point down here on the left-hand side is annual payments for additional services pursuant to your collective bargaining agreement. These here would be your stipends. So yearbook advisor, mentor, drama club, any of those items, as long as both the stipend that you're working and the dollar amount to be paid are listed in your contract, that would be pensionable. Moving on to the right-hand side of the slide. So again, these are items, these are monies that you can receive, but we don't want to receive a retirement deduction on them, and we cannot use them in the calculation of your final salary average. So any amounts paid due to employers' knowledge of retirement. This, of course, would be a retirement incentive and money that you can receive, but it's not pensionable. Cannot use it in the calculation of your final salary average. Next two bullet points, sick leave buyback and unused vacation time. Again, if you're due any of these monies back from your district, you can absolutely accept them, but not pensionable. Don't want that deduction. Cannot use in the calculation of your final salary average. Hourly payments are always excluded with two exceptions. One I already mentioned, athletic coaching. If you're directly instructing a sport, that's directly written into Chapter 32. Hourly, coaching could be pensionable. And the last exception would be breakfast and lunch duty. If you work breakfast and lunch duty within your district, as long as you are physically in the space where the students are eating, that would also be pensionable. But aside from coaching and breakfast and lunch duty, all hourly payments are excluded. Next one down, temporary salary augmentations. This is a bonus. Similarly to employers' knowledge of retirement, you can accept, but not pensionable. And the last one down here has been pretty much phased out through pension reform, but any annuities and fringe benefits would also not be considered regular compensation. Okay, so this is a newer slide that we've added into our program. We know more and more of our members are logging into their MTRS account. And if you have logged on, you may have noticed that your creditable service might look short, or your annuity savings account balance may have some missing money in there. And we want to let you know that progress is being made. Just because you don't see that money and that creditable service doesn't mean it's not there. What happens is every month when your district sends us your retirement deductions, it has to go through a validation process, which takes time. So your deductions and creditable service are securely recorded in our system, but they're just not released into your personal member self-service portal until they've been through that validation process. So this won't impact your retirement benefit in any way. As I said, the money is in our account. It's just not released into your portal. So we just wanted to make you all aware of that in case you noticed that it looked short and you were concerned. Okay, so we have talked about service that you have made an MTRS retirement contribution on, but on this slide, we're going to switch gears just a little bit and talk about purchasing service. So first of all, what does purchasing service even mean? Well, since your benefit is made up of a formula that includes your years of service, you could potentially purchase additional service to add to your years of service on file with the teacher's retirement system. And there's a few different ways that you can do this, which I will explain. So the top half of this slide are different service purchases that are billed at the actuarial interest rate. That rate does and can fluctuate from year to year, but it's been 7% for the past couple of years now. So I'm going to just go through each of these one by one for you. So the first would be refund buyback. If you were previously a member of the MTRS or one of the other Massachusetts public retirement systems and you took your money out, you can apply to, request to apply to buy that back. Next bullet point down is Massachusetts state or municipal employment. An example of this would be a lifeguard at a local pool or a professor at a state college, or maybe you were a clerk for a Massachusetts city or town. You just wouldn't need to be paid with Massachusetts public funds. Next one down here is substitute or temporary teaching. This is definitely our most popular service purchase, given that a lot of our members do have some subbing or part-time teaching before they became eligible for membership with the MTRS. So for this service purchase, the service would have had to have been rendered in a Massachusetts public school. Next bullet point down is out-of-state public school teaching. So if eligible, you can purchase up to 10 years if you were a teacher in another state. You can request to buy this service, but you do need to meet the same eligibility criteria that our members need to meet to become a member of the MTRS, meaning you need to have been certified, required to be certified, working at least 50% or greater, and on a contract. And this is actually our only application that has 3 different parts. Most applications just have two parts, part 1 for you, the member, to fill out, and part 2 for your former employer to fill out. But our out-of-state form actually has a third part to it, part 3, which goes back to your former public retirement system. And this is very important because you cannot be due a benefit in that state and still purchase it here in Massachusetts. So that form does have that extra piece to it there. Next bullet point down here is non-public school teaching. We haven't seen one of these in at least 10 years, and that's because the service would have to have been rendered before 1973. So that's a hard date to beat these days. And the last one down here in this top section is Department of Defense Overseas Dependent School Teaching. And along with the application for this one, you would just need to submit your federal transcript that verifies this service. Moving down to the bottom section, these next 4 service purchases are billed at the buyback rate. The buyback rate is always half the actuarial rate, so currently that is 3.5%. The first one here is military service. You can purchase up to 4 years of your active duty military service. You do need to meet the Massachusetts general law definition of a veteran. Next one down here is non-public school teaching in a Massachusetts publicly funded school. This is one of our lengthier purchases because it has a lot of requirements needed to determine eligibility. But the main one here is that you would definitely have needed to be engaged in teaching pupils. Next one down here is vocational education. You can purchase up to 3 years of the experience that you use to get your vocational license from the Department of Education. And last but not least, we have Peace Corps service. Similarly to vocational, you can purchase up to 3 years. And along with the application, you need to submit certification that you participated in the Peace Corps. And with the exception of refund buyback and Peace Corps, you have to be active at the time that you apply to purchase service. So just a reminder again, you need to be active at the time that you apply. So you have to be actively contributing to apply, with the only 2 exceptions being Peace Corps and refund buyback. So all service purchases have to be paid in full prior to your date of retirement. Late payments will postpone your date of retirement, which would in turn delay your first retirement check. So if you are thinking of purchasing service, it would be a good idea to investigate that now while you are active in our system. If we send you an invoice, you're under no obligation to purchase the service, but it's a good idea now, to take a look into that and make sure, that you've investigated that to see if it's worth it for you to purchase any service. So keep in mind that if we send you an invoice, that rollovers and trust-to-trust transfers can take time. So if we send you an invoice and you want to pay for it, you're going to want to reach out to that financial institution immediately and work through that and confirm that we received the transfer and that the service is paid for. Again, late payments will postpone your date of retirement and can postpone your first retirement check. If you are currently on an installment plan and you're retiring before the installment plan is up, you can contact us at any time and we can provide you with a buyout cost for that invoice. All right, so how do you purchase service? Well, you can get the applications right on our website, mass.gov/MTRS under forms. And like I said, most applications just have 2 parts. Part 1 for you, the member, to fill out. Part 2 over to your former employer. They're nice interactive PDFs. So what that means is you can head on over to our website, find the application that you need, download it to your desktop, and from there you can fill out things like your name, address, member number, all of those things, and hand the entire application over to your employer's payroll office, where they will hopefully be able to provide the information that we need to determine if the service is eligible, and if it is, what the credit and cost associated with that purchase will be. So the way that we calculate the cost for most of these purchases is that we take your earnings in each calendar year that you worked, and we multiply them by what your MTRS retirement contribution rate would have been during that time. That gives us the principal. From there, interest is added on all the way up until the service purchase is paid for in full. We do have a couple of outliers. Most are calculated that way. But for example, vocational military, they have special formulas, and actually those formulas are available right on the applications themselves. If we have enough information to determine that the service is eligible, we will send you an invoice, and you can choose to pay by personal check. We offer that 5-year installment plan I mentioned, or you can do a rollover from an eligible plan. We do have rollover forms available right on our website for you. And later on, Jen will get into how we track both your pre-tax and after-tax payments. All right, questions?
Oh, yes, we've got questions. It's hot in the chat.
All right.
First one, for the 3 or 5 year averages, is it based on the end of the calendar year total or school calendar year total?
So it's going to be your school year. So it's going to be your highest 3 or 5 consecutive years. So if you work till June and your last 3 years were 22, 23, 23, 24, 24, 25, it would be those school years.
I understand the limit working in public schools in Massachusetts after retiring. Are there any income limits working in private schools in Mass or public schools in New Hampshire?
Okay, so we do have a slide on this coming up a little bit later, but there are no limitations for working in the federal government, public, in another state, or private sector.
I have 2 years where I worked as a licensed teacher for a 766 approved school, which I was told by an MTRS rep is eligible for buyback. The school does not have records on hand going back to the early 90s when I worked there. What can I do to address this? And is there someone at the MTRS that can help me?
Okay. Yeah, so if you worked for a 766 school and they're either now closed or they just don't have the information that you need, I would go ahead and still complete your part, the part 1. And then I would just have your former employer have that district tell us in writing that they have no records. Once they confirm with us, either on part 2 or if they send you a letter or something saying that they don't have any records, we can work with you and try to see if we have enough information to piece it together. But I would definitely at least start with filling out your part 1 and getting a statement from your former employer that they have no records.
All right, and last one for now. Why is past service still not updated in our accounts at this time?
Okay, so if you're looking at your service and it's before 2010, we got our new system in 2010, meaning everything going forward will automatically update as your retirement deductions are released into your system. But everything before 2010 has to be manually adjusted by one of our staff. So if you're looking at your account and you have service before 2010 and you don't see it, it doesn't mean it's not there. It's just that one of us hasn't gone in and actually added it into your account. We have to do it manually every single time. So if you're concerned, you can always go on our website right under the forms where you can get the service purchase application. You'll see a form to request a creditable service letter. At that point, when we review your service, we will manually adjust anything before 2010. Good. All right, let's do it. Okay, so the MTRS offers 2 different types of superannuation retirements. The first would be your regular retirement. And as I mentioned earlier, for Tier 1 members, you can retire at any age with at least 20 years of service or be at least age 55 with 10 years of service. Our Tier 2 members have to have 10 years of service and be at least age 60 before they're eligible to retire. Moving down to the next bullet point here, we're going to talk about the Retirement Plus benefit. There are a couple different ways that our members can contribute to Retirement Plus. The first would be if you were already a member before 2001, you would have received an election. If you elected yes, at that point you elected to raise your rate, your retirement contribution rate from whatever it was, up to a flat 11%. If you started contributing to us after June 30th of 2001, you would be mandated into Retirement Plus, which means you're already contributing at that flat 11% rate. Retirement Plus is an enhanced benefit. And what's important to know here is that to be eligible for the enhanced benefit, you need to have at least 30 years of service total, 20 of which must be teaching with either the MTRS or the Boston Retirement Board as a teacher. And once you meet these two requirements, that's when the enhanced benefit starts. So at 30 years, you'd receive an additional 12% added onto your base salary. And from there, an additional 2% is added on for each full year until you max out at the max benefit at 80%. This would also be a good time to say to check your pay stubs and make sure that you're contributing at the right contribution rate. Okay, so here I'm going to go through the different retirement options. There are three. We have A, B, and C. And when you go to fill out the retirement app that Jen is going to take you through, you will see that there is a designated area on the retirement app for you to pick your option. This option is a very personal choice for you and your situation and your family, so we can't really advise you on what option to pick, but we can go through each one of them with you today and kind of let you know the pros and cons of each option. So option A is the maximum allowance. It is the most popular choice, and that's because it is the greatest benefit that you can receive. There's nothing left to anybody should you pass away. There is no beneficiary, so you just receive your highest monthly benefit that's allowable for you. And again, should you pass away, there is nothing to leave anybody. The benefit just stops. Moving down to option B. Option B is about 1 to 3 less than option A. So we always have to figure out option A before we can figure out B or C. So with B, this is actually the only option where your MTRS annuity savings account actually comes into play. And that's because in retirement, you get paid once a month, every month for that month. And every time you get paid, about 20% of that payment is coming directly from your MTRS annuity savings account, and about 80% is coming directly from the state. So over time, your MTRS annuity savings account is depleting itself. You don't see this happening, you don't know what's happening until the state fully is your account is depleted and now the state's paying your full retirement benefit. So with B, you can pick as many beneficiaries as you like, and if there's anything left in your MTRS annuity savings account, it could be left to those beneficiaries of your choosing. But again, if you live longer than about 9 to about 10 years, your account has likely depleted itself and you've taken a 1 to 3% reduction and there's nothing left to leave to your beneficiaries. People who choose this sometimes think of it as a short-term life insurance policy. Moving down to C, this is our second most popular option, and there is about a 9 to 11% reduction here than A. And that's because you have to pick a direct family member. So you pick one beneficiary, either parent, child, sibling, spouse, or former spouse not yet remarried, not a popular option there. And your reduction is based on your age at retirement and their age at your retirement. So if you pick someone that's around your age, like a sibling or a spouse, it's about 9 to 11% less. But if you pick maybe a child or somebody a lot younger than you, that reduction could be upwards of, say, 20%. And what happens with C is, should you or when you pass away, your beneficiary that you picked, that person that's directly related to you, is going to get 2/3 of whatever you were getting for the rest of their life. And in the event that they should predecease you, you would pop up to A as of their date of death. Okay, so this slide is just a quick slide to go over the retirement calculation formula before I get into a couple of examples. So as I mentioned earlier, when you retire, there's an age factor that's based on your age at retirement, and we multiply that by your years of creditable service. That gives us your percentage, the percentage that we can use of your salary average. If you're in retirement plus, this is where we would add that additional percentage. And that's going to give us your total allowable percentage of your final salary average. That is maxed out at 80%. So we take that percentage, we multiply it by your final salary average, highest 3 consecutive years if you're tier 1, highest 5 consecutive years if you're tier 2. And that is what gives us your total option A allowance. If you're a veteran, we would add that bonus in here. And that, again, that would bring us to your total option A annual allowance. So we always have to figure out A before we can figure out B or C. So here's an example. This is Mary. Mary Educator's retiring in just a few months in June here. She's very, very excited. Mary is 59. She's tier 1. So the age factor for 59 is 0.019. Mary has 35 years of service this coming June. So we're going to take 0.019 times 35 years to give Mary a base percentage of 66.5%. We then multiply that 66.5% by Mary's salary average of $75,000, and we get Mary's option A annual benefit of $49,875 a year. Mary's not a veteran, so that is her total option A allowance, $49,875 a year, or $4,156 a month. As I mentioned, we do pay you once a month at the end of the month for that month in retirement. So that's why we break it out monthly for you there. And our next example here is Tom Teacher. Tom is a year younger than Mary. He's also retiring in June. He's excited. Tom is 58. He's a year younger than Mary. Tom has 34.5 years of service. So we take the age factor for 58.018 times 34.5 years, which gives Tom a base percentage of 62.1%. Tom is in retirement plus, so we can actually add an additional 20% onto his base percentage. But as you can see, that is maxed, that's capped at 80%. He can't get higher than 80%. So 80% of Tom's salary average of $75,000 gives Tom an option A annual benefit of $60,000 a year. Tom is a veteran, so he's getting an annual veterans bonus of $300 a year, bringing Tom's option A annual allowance to $60,300 a year, or $5,025 a month. All right, so here at the MTRS, we do not oversee your health insurance, but we do have some tips for you to avoid any surprises at the time of retirement. So if you follow along, we have a checklist in the PDF booklet that we sent you. It's in the back. It's also on our website. And the first thing you're going to want to do is look into health insurance. That's going to be about a year before you retire. You're going to want to contact your local health insurance coordinator. This person may be working within your district or the city or town hall that your district is in. And if you take a look at the slide, if you jump down to the last bullet point there, you'll see that we can arrange to, you can arrange to have your premiums withheld from your retirement check. So that's an option for you to do. Most of our members do take advantage of that, but that is the only control that the MTRS has on your health insurance. It is a local benefit, so you do need to start with the health insurance coordinator for your district. So there's two ways that you can receive retiree health insurance. It's going to either be through the Group Insurance Commission, the GIC, or directly through your city or town. Now, within the GIC, there are two ways that you can receive retiree health benefits. The first is going to be if your city or town or district participates in the Retirement Municipal Teachers Program, the RMT. In the booklet, the PDF booklet, we have a list of those districts that we know participate in the RMT. So really what that means is you're going to have health insurance through the GIC at these RMT rates. We know that the RMT rates are cheaper typically we know that they're cheaper where GIC pays about 80% and the member is responsible for about 20%. Now, if your district is not listed in the booklet, but you know you're in the GIC as an active teacher, you're likely going to have health insurance through the GIC's municipality program. And what's really important to know here, and really any way that you get your retiree health insurance, is that the plan that's offered to you right now as an active employee may not be the same as a retiree. So again, it's really, really important for you to take the time and look into this now to make sure, or really see if your coverage is going to change as a retiree. One thing that you're really going to want to look into is survivor insurance. Should something happen to you, would your survivor have coverage? Another really important thing that we always like to mention during this program is, confirm that your district's even going to offer you health insurance. We have heard situations where a member might switch districts late in their career, go to retire, and the district says, we're sorry, we don't offer health insurance to you until you've been here for at least 5 years. So again, we can't tell you which districts have what plans and what their protocol is. But, if you are thinking of switching districts, this would be an important thing to ask. So if you don't qualify through health insurance through the GIC, you're likely going to have it directly through your district. And again, so same questions that you need to be asking, about the plans and the retiree health insurance. You're going to want to start with that local health insurance coordinator. Now on to Medicare, finding out about Medicare and how it impacts your health insurance. We know there's 3 different ways that you can qualify. The first would be if you qualify for a Social Security benefit, you're going to qualify for Medicare. If you're married to somebody who qualifies for Medicare, you would qualify through your spouse. And the last would be if you changed employers or started teaching after April 1st, 1986, then you've been paying a 1.45% Medicare tax. If you have been paying this tax for 10 or more years, you would be Medicare eligible. So if you do qualify for Medicare, you're going to want to look into supplemental insurance, Medigap. It covers things that Medicare usually doesn't, and it's offered the same way as that retiree health insurance. So again, that same local health insurance coordinator that I talked about earlier, you're going to want to reach out to that person to find out about supplemental Medigap insurance. And the last thing on this slide is to avoid any penalties before your 65th birthday. Please contact Social Security to determine your eligibility and when you would need to apply for Part B. So Part B covers things like general care, doctor's appointments, and we know that if you don't apply by your 65th birthday, that a 10% surcharge will apply to you. And the only exception here would be if you're still teaching and you're 65, 66. At that point, you would just need to apply with Social before you retire. Okay.
Okay, we do have a number of questions. I just want to say we're about a half an hour in, and we're getting close to almost 200 questions in the chat.
Wow.
So picking out a few here. There are many questions about beneficiaries, and there are many questions about R+.
Okay.
But they're of the same variety, so I'm going to try and consolidate them.
Okay.
So first question, beneficiaries, can they change over time?
So if you pick option B, you can change your beneficiary. At any point, even after you retire, you can have as many beneficiaries as you like. With option C, the beneficiary that you choose, that person that's directly related to you, cannot change. And that's because your benefit is literally made up in part by your age and their age. So option C, no. Option B, yes.
For option C, can I select a nephew?
No, parent, child, sibling, spouse, or former spouse not yet remarried, and usually court ordered.
Please explain the word teacher in Retirement Plus. Is a district administrator position considered a teacher?
Okay, so anybody that's a member of the MTRS for Retirement Plus, that's fine. It's more that when we talk about Boston Retirement Board, because Boston is made up of all public Boston employees as well as their teachers. So we say you have to have 30 years of service, 20 of which must be teaching. So any MTRS service that you contributed on would count. And then if you were a member of the Boston Retirement Board, you would just have to have been a teacher.
Okay. Here's a question that we've received, probably about 30 that are of the same flavor. So it's 2 parts. So I'll start with, if I have contributed to Retirement Plus for 25 years, but will not have 30 years, will I get a reimbursement?
If you contributed into Retirement Plus for 25 years and you don't have the 30, yes. If you elected into Retirement Plus, so you elected to raise your rate from whatever it was, 7, 8, 9% to that flat 11, if you elected in, then you would get an R+ refund at retirement.
Great. Second part of that question, how do you figure out how much the reimbursement would be?
For Retirement Plus? So Oddly, I can't tell you that because it's going to depend on how many years you have and the difference every single year between your old rate and the flat 11. But if you happen to be, if you used to be 9%, 9 plus 2%, it's somehow mathematically always $600 a year, if that helps.
How do we find out if we're in Retirement Plus?
Okay, two ways. Check your pay stub. It's going to say it on there. You'll see two lines. If it says 9 plus 2, that's not 11. Another way would be logging into your member self-service portal. If you don't have an account, you can sign up on our website. I think you said it's on the top right, Scott?
Yeah.
Top right, you can sign up for an account. You need your social and something.
Social, date of birth.
And your date of birth, so some common information, and then you can set up an account. Once you're in, it'll tell you what your R plus status is or what your contribution rate is.
Great. For option C, what would happen if both member and spousal designee pass? Would the children receive any payment?
No. So whoever you pick, if you pick your spouse and you pass away, they're going to get 2/3 of whatever you were getting for the rest of their life. And then when they pass away, the benefit stops. If your beneficiary predeceases you, you just pop up to A, and A does not have any beneficiaries. So at that point, when you pass away, your benefit would stop.
Can I pick a sibling as a beneficiary who is not a U.S. citizen and not living in the United States?
I think if you can prove they're your citizen, I mean, if you can prove they're your sibling, I think so. You could always call us too and explain it in further detail to us, but I don't see why not, as long as they're your sibling, direct sibling.
Can you confirm that partial years of service count towards years of service?
Yeah, so up until you retire, all your service counts. We add up everything that you have in your account. And then when you actually go to retire, we only use full years and full months. So if you go to retire and you have 25.1234 years, we add everything up and that's what we get. We use 25.1 in the calculation of your benefit, full years and full months.
Okay. I think this one's of a similar flavor. If I'm retiring on December 1st, 2027, will the salary for the 26-27 year be fully accounted for determining my pension, or will it be prorated for working a partial year?
Okay, so if you were to retire December 1st, 2027, we would use the amount of your salary for that 27-28 school year. So September, October, and one day, September, October, November, one day in December. So let's say a little more than 3 months, and then we go back 2 years, and then we would pull the additional 7 months from the 4th year back. So we're always going to use your highest 3 consecutive years. So even if you retire in the middle of a school year, we still just count backwards to make sure we have 3 full years.
Okay. And last one for now. I taught a grad class at UMass Boston for 3 years. Can I apply for buyback service?
You can apply for that. It would be on the other Massachusetts public service form, as long as it was a public university.
Okay, that's it for now.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, so getting into part 2 here, we are going to start talking about the actual retirement application itself and the steps that you need to take as you approach retirement here. So about 6 months before you're planning to retire, you're going to want to go online to our website, mass.gov/MTRS. You're going to want to estimate your benefit. And then at that point, you're going to want to review general issues and download the 2-part application. That's about 6 months before you're planning on retiring. About 5 months before you're planning on retiring, you should have your part 1 completed. Jen's going to go through that with you in just a couple minutes here. You're going to want to gather the required documents. We'll get into that as well. And you're going to want to hand part 2 over to your payroll office where they're going to complete their portion of the retirement app. About 4 months before your retirement date, you should receive part 2 back from payroll. You're going to want to submit the application to the MTRS at that point. So it would be part 1, part 2, required documents. That would be, ideally about 4 months before your retirement date. So just to give you an example, it's February vacation. We're almost 4 months from June here, and we're starting to see a lot of retirement applications come in. And I always recommend that you make a photocopy of everything that you send us just in case, things do get lost in the mail or whatever. So it's always good that you keep a copy for yourself as well. So when you go to our website, mass.gov/MTRS, you're going to want to browse by career stage. When you click that, you can estimate your retirement benefit. So when you go to do that, you're going to have to let us know if you're tier 1 or tier 2. And from there, you can run some different calculation examples. You can put in your birthday, how many years of service that you think you have. You can run different retirement options. You can put in, what you think your salary average is going to be. And it's nothing formal, but it's a great way for you to get a general idea of what you think you'll be getting in retirement. And once you've done that, it'll take you back to our website here where you can click Ready to Retire. And then you will want to click the step there at the bottom where it says Understand the Retirement Formula and Process. And I always recommend too on this page, you'll see we have some different videos available. So if you have a colleague or coworker who couldn't, make a program or one of these webinars, I always direct them to this page because we do have some very helpful information on our website. And then you can download the retirement application. So this is page 1 of the retirement application. Jen, my colleague, is going to take you through part 1 momentarily. But all I really want to mention on this page is, again, it's an interactive PDF. So you're going to want to download it, save it to your desktop before you start completing anything. It works a lot better if you save it to your desktop first. And like I said, Jen's going to momentarily walk you through this page by page. But before that, I know you can't see this. It's very small probably on your screen. But there's a pink box in the middle. And the only thing I really want to point out on this slide is that it says if we receive your application more than 60 days after your date of separation from service, your retirement date and benefits will not be retroactive back to your resignation date. So again, we always recommend you get it into us 4 months in advance. Like I mentioned on that last slide, they are slowly starting to trickle in this February break week, but you actually have up until 60 days after your date of separation with the district to retain the right to use your resignation date. So for example, say you finish out the school year, you have all intentions of going back to work in September and something in July clicks and you're like, I think I'm ready to just retire. You actually have 60 days from separation to do that. So you have until August 29th to, in a June 30th example, you have 60 days. That would mean that you have until August 29th to submit your application and retain the right to use June 30th as your retirement date. But if we don't get your application in until 61 days later, August 30th, at that point, we would have to move your retirement date 15 days ahead into September. And then you'd lose out on about 2.5 months of pension. So, again, if you are retiring, just make sure you get it to us within 60 days of separation. And I think that's it for me. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to pass this presentation off to Jen.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Thank you very much. We're about halfway through, so take this time to maybe stand up and stretch, loosen up a little bit. We are going to now dive into the retirement application. We're going to go through each page by page, like Jen said, together. And regardless of where you're at with your stages of retirement, maybe you've already filled out your application, maybe you've never even seen it, or maybe you've just gotten started and have some questions, then hopefully going through it page by page, section by section will be beneficial to all of you and be a good guide if down the road, maybe you haven't started it yet, down the road you're gonna take a look at it. So while it may be a little redundant, I hope at the end of it, it will be helpful And as a retirement specialist, I've seen many retirement applications. I'd like to say I've seen it all, but I'm sure I haven't. So I'm here to guide you through everything, all the common errors or questions that we receive, and walk you through the application to make it a little more comfortable. It is 11 pages, so let's get into it. Part 1, page 1, is your basic demographic page. You're going to start out under letter A by selecting your retirement type. As Jen mentioned, there are a couple different retirement types that you can retire under. Mary the Educator was regular retirement formula. Tom Teacher was Retirement Plus. So it all depends on if you elected in or if you're mandated into Retirement Plus, meaning that eligibility would indicate what type of retirement you would check off on this part. You'll also see on the screen involuntary termination retirement. So if you were involuntarily terminated, you would indicate that here, and that would be the type of retirement you would select. Moving on to letter B, this is where you would put your intended date of retirement. Now, if you're retiring at the end of the school year, and say your last day of school is June 22nd, which is very common for you not to work all of June for the end of the school year. By law, anybody retiring at the end of the school year needs to use June 30th as their date of retirement. So your intended date of retirement at the end of the school year should always be June 30th. If for some reason you are not retiring at the end of the school year, some example of that might be if you are working through the end of the school year, but you have a summer birthday, as Jen mentioned, then you can use your actual date of birth as your date of retirement. If you're under the age of 65, this might be financially beneficial for you because it would help increase your age factor from up to that higher age as soon as your birthday. So if you are using your birthday, do just want to reiterate, you would want to use your actual date of birth as your date of retirement to ensure that you're getting the best benefit. Under line C, it's your last date of employment. Again, if you're working through the end of the school year, you can use June 30th as your last date of employment. Similarly with the summer, if you're working through the end of the school year using a summer date, you would put June 30th as your last date of employment as well. Where these two might be different is if you stop working, let's say you stop working in November, but you haven't decided and now you want to go and retire on your birthday in October or in January, you can do that. So it doesn't necessarily always have to be the same date, just to keep that in mind. And lastly, I do just want to say that you can retire at any date throughout the school year. It does not have to be the end of the school year. Everybody's situation is a little bit different, but typically this is the process that we see, and typically members do work through the end of the school year, but we also have many retirees that retire all throughout the school year due to various reasons. And lastly here is if you are also retiring, filing for a disability retirement, you would want to indicate there under line D, yes or no. On the bottom half of page 1, you will enter all your demographic information. There's a couple of key points that we want to point out here on this portion of the retirement application. The first one being, if you are a military veteran, you would want to indicate that under line F. And then lastly, obviously, please fill out all of it, but the key points that we often see missed is also under line J. You would want to put your actual personal email. While you might not be retired yet and you still have your school email address, once you do retire, you're going to lose access to that school email account. So please make sure that you're putting a personal email account, personal email address within this line J, so that way after retirement, we are able to still reach out to you and communicate to you anything regarding your retirement benefit. Now, before moving on to page 2, I do want to point out something that is hopefully very helpful to our members when going through the application. On the left-hand side here, you're going to see some check boxes with some notes on it. These check boxes you'll see throughout the application, and they're meant to kind of guide and help you through the application. There are common things that we see that are either missing or common questions that we have members bring about when filling out the application. The first checkbox here is just a reminder to supply some additional supporting documentation. For your retirement application, we do need documentation of any legal name change. Typically, this is going to be a marriage certificate, but it also could be just a legal name change document as well. Photocopies for this type of document are okay. Another additional supporting documentation that we need is your birth certificate. Your birth certificate does need to be a certified raised seal copy of your birth certificate. This is because your date of birth and your age is used in the calculation of your benefit. So by law, we need to ensure that we are receiving your actual birth certificate with the raised seal. We will touch on it in a couple of pages, but while we're talking about supporting documentation, if you're choosing option C, we do also need your option C beneficiaries certified raised seal birth certificate. And lastly, if you've checked off underline F that you are a veteran, you do need to supply a supporting documentation of the DD 214 along with your retirement application. And this can be a photocopy as well. Moving on to page 2 of the application. Under line K, you're going to indicate the school district that you are currently employed by and retiring from. Line L is going to be if you are a dual member and retiring. If you don't know what a dual member is, chances are that this line does not apply to you and it can be left blank. If you are a dual member, you would want to list under line L the other retirement system that you are concurrently employed by. Line M is if you are eligible for a special spousal benefit calculation. Now, what this is if you are married to if you are married to somebody who is a retiree of another Massachusetts contributory retirement system or the MTRS, and you are under the age of 55, and you were both part of a retirement system on November 1st, 2003, then you may be eligible to have your benefit calculated under the special spousal benefit calculation. And essentially what this is if you're under the age of 55, we use the same formula as your regular benefit calculation. We will just be able to bump up your age factor to age 55. On the bottom half of page 2 is one of 2 places that you're going to indicate your marital status within the retirement application. So under line N, you will see the option of choosing your marital status. Please indicate that there. Indicate your spouse's information. And then under lines Q and R is where you would indicate if you have been divorced, and if you have been divorced, if there is a domestic relations order that is in place. If you do have a domestic relations order in place that is related to your benefit calculation, then we do need you to supply a copy of this domestic relations order along with your retirement application. We may already have one on file, but it is always good to be safe and to make sure that we have the most updated one. So please send in a copy of the domestic relations order along with your retirement application. If you are moving somewhere warm and sunny, maybe Carolinas or Florida, then, or if you're going up north to the cold, we do need your alternate address listed. Whether this might be temporary or permanent, you would want to indicate that here under line S. You can, if you see down at the bottom, it gives you the dates that this address is in effect for. This way, if we are, and I'll get into it in a little bit, but if your first payment is going to be mailed out to you on a paper check, then we want to make sure that that paper check is being sent to you and that you're able to cash your first retirement check, even if it's on the beach in Florida. So please make sure that your most updated address is listed there. And the last small but very important question on this page is the letter T way at the bottom. If you've ever been convicted of a criminal offense having to do with your Massachusetts public employment, we do need that indicated here. If it is not checked yes or no, then your application will be sent back to you as being incomplete, since that is information that we need. On page 3, Jen discussed with you how your benefit is calculated. Your benefit is calculated, as she said, in part by this 3-year salary average of your 3 highest consecutive salaries. Where we get that information of what years that we're going to use is in part by what you put here on the top of page 3. There is a very similar graph that is in page 2 of the retirement application as well. And we obviously do always look at your earning information when calculating your benefit to ensure that we're using your 3 highest years. But this is kind of a checks and balance page to make sure that what you think your 3 highest consecutive salaries are in fact what's going to be used in the calculation of your retirement benefit. So please fill this section out to the best of your ability. If you look on the left-hand side, you're going to see contract year. This is filled out very specifically for this, but you could also put 9/1 to 6/30, 9/1/24 to 6/30/25. So for this example, the last 4 years that are going to be documented or that we should receive documentation on are the members' 4 highest consecutive salaries. So you would indicate the contract year, breaking up each contract year, and then you would indicate on the right-hand side if it's a collective bargaining agreement or if it's an individual contract. On the left now, bringing you from side to side here, on the left of the screen, you're going to see a couple more check boxes next to each line. Basically, what this is saying is that when you get your retirement application submitted into the MTRS, we should have the salary schedules that belong to each different contract year. So it's the grid that has a step and scale that will indicate what your salary is. You would circle it, or it should have a whole grid, and then as long as your salary falls on that, that is what we need supporting with your application. Or if you're covered under an individual contract, we need the individual contract for each of the years that are going to be listed here. Typically, your school district will supply this with you, but just something to keep in mind that if they don't, this does still need to be submitted in order to have your application be complete. On the bottom half of page 3 is where you would indicate, if you see it kind of under, will be letter B, right under that line in the middle of the screen here. If your school district has settled the contract for the current year. If the answer to this is no, please don't let this hold up your submitting your retirement paperwork to us. That is okay. Oftentimes school districts might be still in the stages of settling a contract for this school year. And even though you're getting paid at the last year's contract rate, that doesn't mean that that is all said and done and that you won't be able to use your higher negotiated settled contract rate within the calculation of your benefit. What happens is if your school district hasn't yet settled its contract for this current year that you're retiring in, is once they do settle it, they will notify us, they will give us a settled contract. We will get all of the needed information as far as to what your contract rate and salary and earnings in the retro pay should be for that contract year. And then we will recalculate and do a retroactive adjustment to your benefit back to your date of retirement. So you will not lose out on any money, and you will receive the retroactive payment that will be made out to you. The last thing that I want to point out on this page is this is our first signature page. The signatures are very important that we receive your original wet signature. There's several pages throughout the application that have the signature indicated on there. And just please be sure that you are sending in the original wet signature on this official document. Page 4, I will say page 4 is oftentimes a lot of the phone calls that we receive are members being really nervous about page 4, making sure that they document it perfectly, and it is a kind of an overwhelming page. So let's break it down bit by bit. On the top of the page, you're going to see a list of a bunch of different types of services and some check boxes. Essentially, this is what Jen went over with you all when she was going over the service purchases. The first box is going to be your regular Massachusetts public teaching service. So everybody should check yes on that first box. And then everything else really depends on your service history with the MTRS. If you did have service that you purchased or military service or things like that, that is where you can check off those boxes here. But please note that this page is really just going to be filled out to the best of your ability. If you forget to check one of these boxes, it's not the end all be all. It doesn't mean that the service isn't going to be credited for you. So what we do in the second part of this page is it's basically an expansion of that first part of the page. So you're taking those check boxes and now you're making it, kind of customizing it to you. So you're going to break out who your employers were and the dates of service that you rendered those various employment throughout your career. And on the way right, you will indicate if that service has been credited, if you plan to purchase, or if you're not going to purchase it. Now, this page, again, filled out to the best of your ability, but it is still very important that it is filled out. So for example, this member, when she was filling out her form, Burlington, Vermont is selected as I plan to purchase. So this might be a red flag for a retirement counselor reviewing your application. If you plan to purchase it, but we have no documentation of it and you've never applied for it in the past, that might be a phone call that would be made to you just to say, hey, are you in the process of getting this documented, or are you not purchasing it anymore? Just to make sure that we're all on the same page. We want to be sure that what you think is being used in the calculation of your benefit is in fact what we're using in the calculation of your benefit. We don't want any surprises once you get that notice of estimated retirement benefits in the mail to be way, way off. So underline C is where you would total everything to tell us what you think your estimated total number of years is. And again, this is important. So if we are calculating your years of service at 30 years of service, but you're writing 33.4 years, that again might be a phone call of saying the representative just kind of reaching out and saying, where are those additional 3 years? Is it something that might be on our end? Or is it some type of disconnect between what you think you have and what we think we have? So just kind of connecting those dots. Page 5 is kind of a continuation to page 4. Oftentimes this page can be left blank. This page is to document any leaves of absences, workers' compensation, or military service. So if you've never had any leaves of absences, section D may be left blank. If you had leaves of absences, then you do want to indicate that here. And this, again, is a checks and balance page. We will probably 99 out of 100 times have documentation of your leave of absence, but if we don't, and if it's not documented on part 2, this is a good place for the representative to check if there's any breaks in service to see what additional research we might have to do on our end to be sure that we're calculating your service credit correctly for retirement. Continuing for page 5, as I mentioned, you would document any workers' compensation payments here, or any military service information would be filled out here. Again, pages 4 and 5, to the best of your ability, please fill them out, and page 5 can be left blank. That is okay. All right, continuing on to page 6. This is your direct deposit authorization form, or authorization page, I should say. By law, retirees do need to have their retirement benefit directly deposited into an account. There are 2 different accounts that you could obviously have it deposited into, either a checking or a savings account. If you're having it deposited into a checking account, you would want to submit a voided check along with your retirement application. Simply attach it. Definitely, I recommend stapling it so it doesn't get lost. If you don't have any checks, you can submit an official bank statement verifying your account information. And similarly with your savings account, we would need that official signed bank document just verifying your account information. In the middle of your screen here, you're going to see a very small, but also a very, very important question. I can't tell you how many times when I was an admin, how many times I would have to call members just to follow up on this one little question, and everything else in the application would have been complete. So it's small, but it's important. The question is, are you having your payments deposited into a US bank and then forwarded to a bank in another country? Majority of the time, that answer is probably going to be no, but we do need it in order to kind of finalize the direct deposit information on our end. So please pay close attention to that question and make sure it is checked off yes or no. And then we are going to get into the type of bank account, if it is an individual, joint, or a trust. If you do have a joint account that you're having your direct deposit sent to, then you do need to indicate your joint holder information on section 3B here. And you would want their original wet signature as well as their information. Essentially, they're just saying that, yes, it's okay for the retirement funds to be directly deposited into our joint account. And then the bottom half of this page is going to be our member's wet signature, original wet signature, saying that this is how you want to receive your retirement benefit in a payment via direct deposit into that account. Page 7 and 8, I will say, are most commonly the pages that either get sent back to members or that members have questions or issues with the signature dates. So I'm going to do my best to break it down here. It may seem simple, but it can be a little bit tricky just to make sure that everything is signed and dated and acknowledged accordingly. So when Jen was going through the retirement calculations with you, she indicated that there are 3 different options A, B, and C. This is where options A, B, and C live within the retirement application. If you're retiring under the maximum benefit of option A, you would check option A on this screen. If you're retiring under option B, you would check B. And lastly, if you're retiring under option C, you would indicate option C. Please be aware that if you accidentally check more than one of these, just print out a new page 7 and fill it out nice and clean. Only one option can be selected in order for us to process your retirement benefit. If you're choosing option C, this should be the only time that you would fill out the option C beneficiary information on this portion of the application. So if you are selecting option C, we would need your beneficiary's name, date of birth, social security number, and their relationship to you. Again, parent, sibling, child, spouse, or former spouse not yet remarried. I mentioned it when we were going over page 1, but just to reiterate, if you are choosing an option C beneficiary, we do need that original raised seal birth certificate for your option C beneficiary as well, and a marriage certificate just to confirm the relationship between you and your option C beneficiary. And essentially, page 7 is Mary Educator, in this example, is choosing option C. She's choosing her husband, Joseph, as her option C beneficiary. And by her signing and dating that bottom page of page 7 is us, her indicating to us to calculate her benefit under option C. On page 8, the top half is the second part where you would indicate your marital status within the retirement application. You would need to check any box that applies, whether you're married, been divorced, not currently married, or if you are widowed. If you have been divorced, you would also need to, as a reminder, supply us with the domestic relations order information if applicable, or if there is no domestic relations order in place, you would indicate that here. And again, sign original wet signature and date. Now, in the bottom half of page 8 is where things get a little sticky sometimes. So we just want to make you aware of this, and hopefully this will make it a seamless process for you. When you are filling out, this is the spousal acknowledgement page. Basically, the purpose of this page is that the member's spouse is acknowledging the fact that the option they selected on page 7 is in fact what they selected and they agree with it. So the purpose of this page is to have that spouse sign off on that option selection. And then also below, you'll also see that there's a witness signature. That also needs to be signed off and dated on the same date. So in this example, as we went over on page 7, Mary Educator chose option C, opting her husband as her beneficiary and signed and dated on 3/1/2025. So Joe Educator, her spouse, is acknowledging that she chose that option C. And Wilma Witness, is there with Joe saying, yeah, I see Joe looking at page 7 and yes, she did choose option C and he's okay with it. So in a perfect world, all 3 of these dates are all going to be on the same date. If that's not the situation, that's okay too, as long as the signature dates on page 8 are either on or before, or on or after, I'm sorry, as long as the signatures on page 8 are either on or after the date of the member on page 7, your application will be perfect as far as page 7 and 8 go, and it will not be sent back to you. If these dates are off, then your application will be sent back to you to have you redocument this type of, redocument these pages. Page 9 is where you would indicate your beneficiaries for either options A and B. Option A doesn't have a beneficiary that would be assigned to it, as Jen mentioned, but there is an option A month of death payment that would be able to be paid out to a recipient. So upon your passing, let's say you pass away on the 15th of a month, you're still entitled to the portion of the month that you were living from the 1st to the 15th to receive that benefit. So that can be, you can assign somebody here to elect them as your option A beneficiary. Please keep in mind that the percent does need to equal 100% if you are indicating more than one person. And we do need social security numbers indicated here. Similarly with option B, as Jen broke down the option B selection for you, you would indicate your option B beneficiaries here, indicating their social security number. And again, the percent of benefit does need to total 100%. If you have more than just 2 option B beneficiaries, you would just print out additional pages and include the additional members or additional beneficiaries on those pages. And then lastly, on the bottom of this page is you have a contingent beneficiary designation. This is only applicable for options A and B. So if you were to decease and your option A and B beneficiaries were to also pass away, then it would, whatever is due to you as a retirement benefit or a beneficiary payment rather, would be paid out to these optional contingent beneficiaries. If you don't want a contingent beneficiary, it is okay to leave this blank. The last official page of the retirement application is page 10. There is an additional excerpt that comes after, which is the W-4P tax withholding page. Essentially, this is your federal, the form that you use to indicate the amount of federal tax withholdings from your retirement benefit. Now, if you are going to complete that form and submit it with your application, you would check the first box. If you choose to not complete that form, you can indicate that here. And what the MTRS will do is we will withhold the federal taxes at the single claiming zero withholding amount for your federal taxes. And we will get into it in a little bit. We're going to go over a couple different slides about working after retirement. So hopefully all of you who are here and watching can confidently check off that X saying that you are aware of the working after retirement earnings restrictions and guidelines for working after retirement. And this is your, not your last one yet, but your second to last wet signature that we do need from you on the application. Lastly, the bottom half of page 10 is really just your checklist. So you've gone through, you've completed everything. So we just want to make sure that you're sending everything appropriately to us. So it's going to be just a checklist for you to go through to make sure that you have all the additional documentations, voided checks, certificates, birth certificates, things like that to make sure that everything is coming to us together. As promised, here is the IRS W-4P federal tax withholding form. This is the IRS's form, which we are mandated to use. So it's a little bit of an explanation as far as to how to fill out the form. And here is the lovely W-4P federal tax withholding form. Step 1 is going to be your basic demographic information. Lines A and B should always be filled out. In line C, if you're having your federal taxes withheld based off of the tax table, then you would want to indicate, check off either married, single, or head of household here to indicate how you want your federal taxes withheld. If you are only filling out step 1 and then all the way down at the bottom, step 5, that sign and date, then that would be considered a complete form. But If you are in a different situation and you either have some additional dependent information that needs to be withheld, or you're claiming some additional incomes, you would indicate that under steps 2 and 3. And lastly, step 4 would be if you want additional amounts deducted on top of the standard withholding, you could indicate that those amounts in this page as well. Again, just to reiterate, we are not tax professionals here at the MTRS. Some people might be, but not all of us. So if you have any specific questions, please reach out to an accountant or a tax professional. We are your retirement specialists and we will get that right, but taxes we'll save for the others. And hopefully the easiest part of the application that you'll have to fill out is the retirement application part 2. Just the top part needs to be filled out by you. It is just your demographic information, the same information that you filled out on the part 1, page 1, and your school district. One thing to keep in mind is that it may apply to you that you would need to submit more than one part 2 of the retirement application to us. A couple of different scenarios that this might be is if you are retiring from 2 districts. So if you are, let's say you're 50% in Sturbridge, 50% in Worcester, then we would need, at the time of retirement, we would need you to supply 2 part 2s from each school district that you're retiring from. Another scenario that this might be applicable to would be if you are, let's say you were an administrator in Worcester prior to coming over to Sturbridge to be a teacher. You would have to supply us with a part 2 from Sturbridge for your teaching service that you're retiring from, but we would still need your salary information from Worcester. So you would want Worcester to document your higher salary earning information and supply that on a part 2 application. And then you would send those in to us. Once you get the part 2 back from your payroll, I advise you just to look it over, make sure that everything is correct to the best of your knowledge. If you have questions, that is your time to go back to your payroll and ask them any questions that there might be. Please make a photocopy of both part 1 and part 2 for your records, just to keep on hand in case something might get lost in the mail, God forbid, likely doesn't happen, or just to have in your records for future reference. When you're done with the retirement application and you make the copy, please be sure that you are going to mail us in your original copy, though. I know you all know how passionate I am about those wet signatures, just to make sure that we get that original documentation in-house. And you're going to provide us with the original documentation, both parts 1 and 2, any accompanying documents such as the birth certificates, marriage certificates, salary schedules, voided check. Make sure that we have everything all together, and then you're going to send it into the mass teachers for us to review for completeness. Now, if you are able to mail it in to us, you can absolutely mail us in your original copy. But if, for example, you have a very special birth certificate with your baby feet stamped on it or something like that, and you don't feel comfortable mailing it in, that is okay. You can simply just send us, you can come into our office for our walk-in appointments. We are both offices are open in Springfield and Charlestown for walk-in appointments. We are open from 9 to 4:45 every day. If you need to, you can bring us in your application. We'll review it for completeness, make copies of your original document, and then give you your originals back right there on the spot. So, but you can absolutely also mail it in to us if you want to send it via certified mail or whatever best suits your needs. We will ensure that you get your original documentations back to you via the mail as soon as we get it in-house. If your application is complete and you get a letter from us letting you know that your application is here and complete, we will process those benefits or those applications on a first come, first served basis. If your application is incomplete, you'll get that letter out from us letting you know what is incomplete on it and what needs to be fixed. And then once you send us in the application with your corrections, we will then let you know if it isn't complete or still incomplete, still missing things. So there will be a communication that will be sent out via mail letters to you regarding the status of your application. However, once it is complete, we will process it on a first come, first served basis. If for whatever reason there is, once it is assigned to a retirement counselor, if there's missing information or if we need some additional clarification on some information, that retirement counselor will reach out to your school district. Oftentimes this won't cause a delay, but if it's something a little bit larger of an issue and it may cause a delay on your payment schedule, then the retirement counselor will reach out to you to make you aware of this delay and to explain and make sure that you're involved in the process of why your retirement application or why your retirement payments may be delayed. Once we get your applications in-house, our general processing time is 4 months from when we receive your retirement application to when we send out your notice of estimated retirement benefits. Your notice of estimated retirement benefits will be mailed out to you once your benefit calculation is complete. And it is essentially a letter that will break out your salary average. It'll break out your age that was used in the benefit, your years of service, your account balance, and then lastly and most importantly, what your payment will be for retirement on an annual and monthly basis. As I mentioned, in most cases, you're going to receive your first retirement check 4 months after you file your documentation with the MTRS. If for whatever reason this is delayed, that would be considered our general processing time for on-time files. If you, as Jen mentioned, you have up until 60 days from your date of separation to still use that date as your date of retirement. But let's say that you are a June 30th retiree and right now you think you're going to work a couple more years and you don't have retirement on your mind. But let's say in May, something comes up and you're like, actually, I am going to retire this year. So even if this May, you make that choice to decide to retire at the end of the school year, you can do that. What we do want to make you aware of is that your benefit payment will be delayed because we process those first come, first served basis on an on-time basis to make sure that we get everybody paid in the order of which they're received. So if you hand it in May, you will still have that 4-month processing time. So your benefit payment will be calculated and finalized in September, but you're not going to lose out on any money. What essentially is going to happen is that you're going to receive a one-time retroactive lump sum payment back to your date of retirement. So you'll receive that payment in September for all of July, August, and all of September, those 3 months that you've been retired for. And then after September, your benefit payment will be continued at that 1 monthly payment at the end of each month for that month that you've been retired. Please note that your direct deposit or your retirement payment does have to be paid via direct deposit. However, depending on when your retirement application is processed, it may impact your first check. By that, I mean that instead of getting a direct deposit for your first payment, you may get an actual paper check in the mail that will be mailed out to you, which is why it's very important on that page 2 of the retirement application to make sure that your address, if you have an alternate address, to make sure that is up to date so that your first retirement check, if it is mailed, will be received by you. Okay, and pop quiz, I hope everybody knows the answer. How are you going to get your retirement payment? Everybody should have said direct deposit there. It is definitely a direct deposit. It is mandatory into your accounts. Your retirement allowance will be paid at the end of each month into that direct deposit information that you indicated on the retirement application. You're only going to receive a monthly statement if there's any change in your retirement allowance, or if the MTRS is sending out an announcement or to notify all retirees. And lastly, you will receive a monthly statement amount every December for the end of the year summary. All right, Scott, what do you have for questions?
Are you ready?
Yeah.
We now have approximately 420 questions in the queue.
All right.
I'm going to try and combine because a lot of them are the same flavor.
Okay.
But before we get to that, there seemed to be some confusion around the definition of wet signature. So I just want to clarify that it's the original signed document, not a photocopy, not an Adobe signature, not a digital signature.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about, right?
Yes, and we also don't want a wet retirement application. We just want your original signature, wet signature meaning from a pen on the application. Okay. Yes, exactly.
You also addressed mailing documents in. A lot of people are expressing concern about mailing their birth certificate and getting them back, and you mentioned you can bring them in person, but if you're, if you live far away, would you recommend sending a certified mail?
Absolutely. I would say majority of our applications do come in certified mail. We do have to have some faith in our postal service to be able to get those documents securely to us. They will get securely to us. We'll make copies. Everything will stay together. We'll make copies of those original documents, and then we will mail them back to you with either your acknowledgement letter or an incomplete letter. So we don't want to hold on to your original documents any longer than we need to. As soon as your file is reviewed, we're sending those right back to you. So if you feel a little uneasy about that, please rest assured that it's a process that we've had in place for many, many years, and typically it goes very smoothly.
Great. So some specific questions in the chat. Do I have to notify the MTRS about retiring other than submitting my retirement application?
You do not. Every school district may be a little bit different as far as to when you have to let them know for retirement purposes or payouts or things like that. But as far as the MTRS goes, when we receive your retirement application, is you letting us know that you're retiring, and that is okay.
Great. What if I was born in a different country and can't access my original birth certificate? Can I use my naturalization certificate or a U.S. passport?
Yes and yes. Any additional supporting documentation that you can provide us in place of that birth certificate is helpful. And exactly, naturalization certificate and U.S. passport will be sufficient to support your date of birth validation. Sorry.
So for the application, do I put in the salary that's based on the contract or based on my W-2?
So for your salary information and how the MTRS looks at your salary, we're always going to look at it on a school year for teachers. For administrators, we're looking at it. Typically, administrators run July to June. For teachers, we're going to look at your service from September to June. That's kind of how only the way we operate. So we are going to your contracts are all spelled out from September to June on a school year basis, as well as your earnings are submitted to us on a school year basis, as well as any additional deductions that we're reviewing are on a school year basis. So that's how we view it. W-2s for us aren't really needed because we have all of your earning information get sent over from your school district.
Right. Is it okay to print out and write the application by hand?
Yes, absolutely. You can download it and save it the interactive PDF way, but if you feel more comfortable or even more official doing it by hand, you definitely can do so. I would highly recommend please do it in pen. It is an official document, so if you are going to do it by hand, just fill it out in pen, and that is absolutely okay.
Is there a way to confirm the retirement percentage before we fill out the retirement application?
So there is a way, and I would say the best reference for confirming your retirement percentage would be to use our online estimator. Fill everything out. If you've received a creditable service estimate from us, you're able to accurately input your information in there as far as your years of service. You don't need a creditable service estimate or a final number from the MTRS in order to retire. If you're looking for that information, we obviously can provide that, but you would really want to go on that online estimator, put in the information to the best of your knowledge. It'll compute out your percentages on all options A, B, and C, and you're able to change around the salary average that you're using. You're able to change around the retirement date that you're using. So it is a really good tool for our retirees to go on there and kind of play around with to get a better figure of what you're going to be at for your retirement percentage.
Great. Let's do lightning round. Is this considered a leave of absence? Out for short-term surgery on FMLA?
If it is paid and we're getting full paid contributions on that, then you will receive full service credit for that time period. If it's a partial paid leave of absence, then you'll get partial prorated service credit for that leave of absence. If it's an unpaid leave of absence that is longer than 1 month of time, then you will get up to 1 month of service credit for that leave of absence. I think that answers it.
So that that would also apply for maternity leave.
Correct. Maternity leave is the same way, exactly.
Okay. And then another question, oh, and my chat just clunked out. Is there FMLA being paid through sick time? Is there a difference there? Or is that basically the same?
No, that would basically be the same thing. So any fully paid sick leave that your school district is paying you in full and you're not having any decrease in the amount that you're being paid, you would receive full service credit for that. And honestly, the MTRS wouldn't really notice anything different because you're still making those full contributions into us. So it's not going to affect your service credit for a full paid leave of absence.
Great. One more question for now. Can you split option C between your kids?
You cannot. Unfortunately, you can only choose one beneficiary for option C. If you wanted to split a beneficiary, that would have to be an option B. But for option C, since the age of that beneficiary is a direct impact on the calculation of the payout for both the retiree and the beneficiary, then you can only choose one beneficiary for your option C.
Okay. I think that's it for now. My chat window crashed, so I'm going to be switching computers.
Okay.
That's it for now.
All right, sounds good. No problem. We will have another question at the end as well, I think. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, working after retirement. I know it's probably not what a lot of you are planning on doing right now because you're thinking about retiring. You don't want to have to think about working after retirement. But unfortunately, the reality is either you want to return to work after retirement or you have to. So there are going to be no limitations to your work that you can perform after retirement in the private sector. No limitations on any employment within another state, whether it's private or public. I know that question came up earlier. And no restrictions on your employment with federal government. Where you will see working after retirement restrictions is going to be your employment within a Massachusetts public sector. If you are a retiree returning back to work for the same employee that you retired under, you do need to be separated from service for at least 60 days in order to return back to work with that same district. So for example, if let's say you're retiring at the end of June, you have to be separated 60 days. Typically for our retirees, if you're retiring at the end of June, then you are cleared to return back to work with that same employer starting in September. That is okay because you meet that requirement of the 60-day of separation. Please note that the 60-day of separation is waived if you are retiring at age 62 or above, or if you're retiring under the maximum benefit of 80%. For working after retirement in a public sector, there are limitations on both your hours and your earnings. Your hours that you work in that public sector cannot exceed 1,200 hours within a calendar year. Your earnings cannot exceed a calculation between the difference of what you are currently receiving as a retiree, subtract out, what you would receive had you had not retired, subtract out what you're currently receiving as a retiree, and then that amount is the remaining amount that you can earn working after retirement. After being retired one full calendar year, this earnings amount does increase by $15,000. Please keep in mind that the time and the earnings are not an either or, it is whichever comes first. Typically, we see our members getting close to the earnings limitation well before the time limitation. So if that happens, then you do have to stop working, and we'll touch on that in a little bit as well. And we're going to break out the working after retirement earnings calculation a little bit because it can get a little bit tricky. So let's look at Mary Educator and kind of break down the calculation of that. So for Mary Educator, she retires on June 30th, 2024 from a position that paid her $77,000 per year. So if Mary wants to return back to work after retiring, what she'll have to do is go over to her school district and ask them, or she can call them and ask them, if I didn't retire, what would I be earning for the 24-25 school year? Now that figure that her school district should give her should not just be her base salary. That would want to be included any regular compensation. So her base salary, her longevity, coaching, eligible stipends, anything that would be regular compensation is what would want to be in that figure when determining your earnings. So for Mary, her salary would be $79,000, or what she would be earning would be $79,000. We're going to subtract out Mary's gross annual MTRS pension that she's getting paid, which in this example is $50,175. And this will leave us with Mary's allowable earnings for the remainder of the 2024 calendar year of $28,825. So this is what Mary can earn. So if she's retiring June 30th, this is her allowable earnings that she can earn from July 1st all the way through December 2024. Now it's a good healthy amount of earnings for Mary there. And please keep in mind that after she's retired one full calendar year, she will be able to have an additional $1,500 added to that benefit, or added to that allowable earnings. So for Mary's one full calendar year that she'll need to wait as a retiree will be from January 1st, 2025, all the way through December 2025. That's her one full calendar year that makes her eligible as of 1/1/26 for that additional $1,500 or $15,000 per calendar year. Please keep in mind that this is not cumulative or not compounding. It is a one-time enhancement on the allowable earnings when it is calculated. One thing I want to point out is that we typically see our members running into the earnings and hours limitations when you're getting into your second school year, typically. So if you're returning back to work, if you're Mary and she's returning back to work in September of 2024, she has all those allowable earnings through December of 2024. Since we look at the allowable earnings in the hours worked on a calendar year basis, not a school year, that first school year that you return back to work is going to be split up amongst 2 different school years. So we will look at her allowable earnings as long as she doesn't go over the 28,825 from September to December, she's okay. Similarly with the hours, as long as she doesn't go over 1,200 hours in that time period, she's okay. Mary would have to be working very, very hard to go over that 1,200 hours as a retiree, and I think she'd be all right. So then starting again, you kind of start as a clean slate in January of 2025. We're going to look at it from January 2025 through June of 2026, or I'm sorry, June of 2025. And as long as she's not going over those hours or earnings limitations, she's okay. Typically is when we the second school year after retirement is when you might get into the earnings and the hours limitation or getting close to it, because we're going to pair her earnings from January through June of that school year with her earnings from January 2020 or September 2025 through December 2025. So since that calendar year is a longer time span of working, that's when we typically see members getting closer. So just something to keep in mind if you are returning back to work. Kind of keep an eye on it when you get to your second year, especially. If a school district is having difficulties finding somebody to fill a position, they can apply to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education for a critical shortage waiver. What this is it's typically a short-term employment, 6 months to a year, for them to hire back a retiree. Now, as a retiree, you have the ability to work in this critical shortage position, earning your full MTRS retirement pension and earning your full salary under that critical shortage waiver position, and you do not have to pay retirement contributions on that critical shortage position earnings. In order to be eligible to work under a critical shortage position, please keep in mind that the 60-day of separation is still applicable to those members. So if you are returning back to the same district, you still have to wait those 60 days as if you're not over the age of 62 or at the 80% max benefit. And then for those retiring under Retirement Plus, you have to wait 2 years in order to be eligible to return back to work under a critical shortage position. Some additional precautions: if you are returning back to work in a Massachusetts public sector, but you're not technically a specific employee of that public agency, let's say you're a leased employee or a consultant, your limitations on the hours and the earnings are still going to be applied to you. Even though your technical employer isn't a public entity, it's any service rendered within a public entity in the public sector is limited with those restrictions of the hours and the earnings. If you are in a situation and you know that you're getting close to either the hours and the earnings, then you do have the ability to freeze your MTRS pension. Basically, what this does is it puts your retirement pension on a pause. It allows you to continue that service and still to continue that service without going over the limits. And then once you complete that calendar year of earnings and hours, then you can resume receiving your retirement benefits. You won't be paid a retroactive adjustment or anything like that. It's simply pausing your benefits, continuing your earnings, and then resuming your pension after that. If you do go over the hours or the earnings limitations, then the MTRS is mandated to recover all of those excess earnings that you have gone above and beyond the limitations. The good news when it comes to taxation of your benefit is that your pension is not going to be subject to any Massachusetts state taxing. The bad news is that the federal government never lets you get away, and it will still be subject to federal taxes. We've gone through this part of the retirement application with the W4P W4P form. That is where you indicate the federal tax pension amount that you want withheld from your retirement pension amount. And you submit that to us. Please keep in mind that at any point throughout retirement, you can change or adjust the federal tax withholding amount simply by going on mass.gov/MTRS under forms for retirees, print out a new W4P form and send it in to us. So if you notice that there's not enough or there's too much being deducted for your federal taxes, you can absolutely make that adjustment at any point throughout retirement. If you have contributed any after-tax money to the MTRS, that would be either service that you rendered prior to 1988, or maybe you bought back a service purchase with some after-tax funds. These are all kept separately within your annuity savings account. We want to ensure that you're not going to be paying taxes on those funds twice, so they are kept in a separate reserve. Every year, you're going to receive a 1099-R. Essentially, this is the retiree version of a W-2. Within this 1099-R, there is going to be a box that will indicate your after-tax funds amount that is in your after-tax funds balance. You will typically recoup this money in about 20 to 30 years. For those who are living out of state, you will receive a benefit verification form for every other year. Essentially, this is an alive and well check to make sure that you are still with us and you are still the one receiving your benefit from the MTRS, just to avoid pension fraud. And lastly, if you are moving out of state, you would also want to check with that other state to ensure that if there will be any additional state tax on your pension amount within that state that you're moving to. Social Security. Now, this used to be a very scary slide for you and I both, but it's actually gotten much better. And that is because Social Security passed the Social Security Fairness Act of 2023, and it was signed into law on January 5th, 2025. What this did is it essentially repealed the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset provision. Now, both the WEP and GPO historically reduced or even eliminated Social Security benefits for teachers and other public employees. So this is definitely a very positive thing for our members, and it's a very great thing to be able to present this to you. That being said, we're here to make you aware of this as a Massachusetts state pension holder, but we are not Social Security. So if you have any specific questions about your Social Security, how your benefit will be affected, or what you're entitled to, please visit their website, ssa.gov. They have a lot of very helpful information that they recently updated into their website. It's typically on the top banner, just click on it. It has a lot of FAQs or ways to apply, or in general, just a lot of very helpful information. So please visit their website or reach out to Social Security with any specific questions. All right, so let's end on another positive topic here, cost of living adjustments. After one full fiscal year, you are entitled to get a cost of living adjustment. It does have to be approved by legislature, but typically it does get approved. And what this cost of living adjustment is it's 3% or the consumer price index, whichever is less, on the first $13,000 of your retirement allowance. It's a maximum of $390 per year and $780 the next year and so on. So it is cumulative. It doesn't keep up with inflation, but it is still something. Okay, and with that, I will send it back over to Scott. Thank you all for listening today and great questions. And I think we're going to take a couple more.
Yeah, we'll take a couple more. Our staff in the other room who are on the laptops, chatting back and forth with you in the chat. I just have to give them kudos. They are keeping up with the questions. And I didn't want to freak out the speakers, but we were close to 1,000 attendees at one point, and we've received over 500 questions. So thank you for asking the questions, and thank you to the team in the other room.
Thank you all for being so attentive. That's
wonderful. Chatting away. It's great. Super duper. Who can be a witness of agreement of option A, B, or C?
Anybody over the age of 18 could be a witness. So if you and your husband are filling this out and a mailman's going by, you can pull him in and have him sign and date it. Anybody over the age of 18 can be a witness for that.
On the application, if there are any boxes that don't apply, do we leave them blank or write NA in the spaces?
That is definitely a personal preference. If you want to make sure all your I's are dotted and T's are crossed, you can absolutely write NA. If you read the question thoroughly and you know it doesn't apply to you, you can leave it blank if you'd like as well.
And then just one last one. It's not really a question. It's just more of something I want to state. You did just talk about Social Security, the web GPO repeal. I put a link into the chat that goes directly to the web GPO page of the SSA, and right at the title at the top, there's a link that says subscribe, and you can put in your email address and they will email you when the page and the FAQs for web and GPO have been updated. I've done that and I've received, I think, 2 updated emails already since they've updated the site. So that's a great thing to do if you want to stay on top of the web and GPO.
Absolutely. We are constantly updating it too. You would go on one day and then the next day there's some more information. So that's definitely good.
I highly recommend that. I don't have any other specific questions in the chat. Like I said, we've received over 500 and the team in the other room is still banging away answering them. So thank you.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you all. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your break, whatever's left of it.